Hello, and welcome to a special edition of Up Close on METV. I'm Charles Clapsaddle, Station Manager for Manatee Educational Television. It's my great pleasure to have with us today three gentlemen who are going to talk about a very important issue for our community, and that's abuse upon the elderly, especially fraud and scams that are perpetrated on the elderly in our community. So let's introduce our panel and get right into it. First of all, we want to introduce John Hornberger. John, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Charles.
You're going to be hosting a future series on METV called Good Choices for Seniors, and we welcome that opportunity because of the senior population here in Manatee County, but also on such a wide variety of subjects like the one we're going to talk about today, but on other projects as well.
Well, I'm looking forward to that, Charles, and among some of the things we'd like to talk about in the upcoming months, returns have been wonderful the last several years, and we've gotten used to that. I want to bring some perspective and manage our expectations.
Well, we welcome that opportunity. I think with your insight and background, was it 20 some odd years in financial management? That's terrific. Also, you're a retired Lieutenant Colonel of the Army Reserve, a couple of combat tours under your belt.
Yes, sir.
Well, we're welcoming you and thank you for your service.
Thank you.
And also joining us today, and we're welcoming him and his partner here today, is Detective Tom Kazmarek. Tom, thank you very much for joining us. And you've been with the Sheriff's Department for how long?
This will be my 15th year.
Well, congratulations on that. And we're very anxious to hear some of your input and insight on these crimes against seniors. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
And also joining us today is Lieutenant Andrews. Now, Lieutenant Andrews, you're with Crime Prevention. Is that correct, with the Sheriff's Department?
That is correct.
And, which I think is an important facet of the Sheriff's Department to help prevent those crimes that we're going to be talking about today.
Absolutely. Our sole function really is education to the adult community, trying to bring some of these issues to light. So when these issues do present themselves to them, they can better deal with them and then contact us about them.
Now, we want to kind of concentrate today, John and gentlemen, on the fact about financial fraud. And there's a lot of frauds that are perpetrated, unlicensed contractors and the like. But today we want to kind of concentrate and narrow down the aspect of what is the financial fraud. And first of all, John, to you and gentlemen, how big a problem is this in our county?
Well, that's a good question, Charles. The problem is huge nationwide and in our community. For example, last year alone, 9 million Americans had their identity stolen. That resulted in financial losses to consumers and merchants of almost $3 billion. So for seniors, 1 out of every elder is targeted financially for abuse, but only 1 out of 44 of those cases goes reported.
And that's such a shame, too, because we're going to talk about some of the cause and effect of that. And Lieutenant and Detective, tell us, how often do you see these kind of financial fraud against this elderly in our community?
Every day.
Every day?
Every day we're getting cases on a different scam that's going around, another victim. The senior citizen community is targeted more so than none because their willingness to want to help and their trustworthiness, and to be quite frank, they like talking to people, and they want to be able to help somebody in need as well. So we do see it.
And I think you hit a great point in there. A lot of seniors, sometimes they're living by themselves. They feel isolated, so they get a phone call or a visit from someone. They're receptive to those type of things. And one of the things that, John, that you mentioned and talked about is that 90% of these abusers are personally known and trusted by their victims.
For example, Charles, that's a good point. How many of us remember Mickey Rooney? Everybody loves Mickey Rooney. Well, not everybody. Apparently his own son-in-law
really
didn't love Mickey Rooney. Mickey died with $18,000 to his name because his stepson, not his son-in-law, it was his stepson, systematically entrapped him, kept him isolated from everybody else, and stole his money over a period of years.
And it's a real shame for that because, you know, I think that the seniors in our community, I mean, they've contributed, they've served in, you know, world wars, they've worked hard all their life, they have their home and everything. And, you know, people prey upon the most vulnerable of victims because I'm sure, you know, if one of us got a call and one of you three got a call and you would automatically know that, you know, there's something amiss about this. But when you're a senior and you're isolated and you feel a little bit alone, if somebody's friendly to you and they, you know, talk to you for a little bit, you become a little bit more receptive to that. And do you find that, Detective?
Yeah, a lot of times I do. You know, the people create an illusion on a lot of these scams to where they make it feel so real when they're talking to them on the phone that they just trust right to what they're saying and, you know, play into the game and give them the money or think that they're now a business owner and part of the game. So a lot of times, yes.
They also prey on the generational differences. In the older generation, like we talked about the veterans, it was your word was your bond. People called you, you took them at face value. There wasn't the deception. So they're calling in, like Tom was saying, they'll prey on that, you know, God bless you. They'll use different tactics to gain their trust and make them think that they're trustworthy and prey upon those generational differences.
And you know, and again, that isolation plays a huge role in that as well. But you know, there's different things too. That, you know, when you're a senior and you're aged a little bit, sometimes there are impairments that occur. You know, you're not as fast on the uptake. You might have a hearing loss or something. But you know, people take advantage of all of these vulnerabilities. You know, especially on the senior population.
Absolutely.
Do you find that to be true?
With my clients, as your dear clients age, you see varying degrees of cognitive impairment. Absolutely. So then that makes them not as apt to pick up on the red flags, like you mentioned, Charles, that maybe when we're younger, we're a little bit quicker to pick up upon.
Yeah. And you know, another thing that, you know, just staggers me personally is that, as you mentioned, only 1 out of 44 cases gets reported. So for every case that you get, Tom and Lieutenant, you know, there's dozens others that just go unreported because they're embarrassed or, you know, they don't know how to do that. So do you find that's the case?
I do, and a great point of that is to kind of add on what John was saying. You know, if I asked you right now, how do you bail somebody out of jail? You would probably say, okay, well, you know, go to a bail bondsman or pay the bail. A lot of times, the senior citizens are called in the grandparent scam, for example. They think a loved one's in jail, and they go and get Walmart prepaid gift cards. They go get prepaid Visa cards, iTunes cards. The perpetrator will say, this is what I need to get your loved one out of jail. 20 years ago, they probably would have said, absolutely not. That's not how it's done. But now, because like you were saying, they're not as quick on the uptake, they're more of the concern of their loved one. They go out and buy these things and the money's gone.
Yeah, and we want to talk about some of these scams. You mentioned the grandparent scam, which I think is terrible because it's preying on people's fears and vulnerabilities. But before we get into the specific tactics of people, let's talk about how people approach the elderly and what tactics are they using to approach the elderly. John, you know, what do you see? What do you know about these tactics?
Good question, Charles. 2 major hot buttons that the con artist will use. And there are 2 destructive emotions that get the average investor in trouble all the time. Those emotions are fear and greed. And as we go through these scams, our viewers should be thinking to themselves, what button are they pushing in this scam? Fear or greed? So that's one thing. We talked about their trusting, we talked about their isolation. One thing we didn't touch on, why do the con artists pick on the elderly? Why don't they pick on starving college students? Well, it's easy.
They have money.
They have money. They've been working their whole lives. They've saved up all of this money so the con artists see this as a very attractive target.
And you know, one of the things that you had mentioned earlier as well is that, and I think we briefly talked about this before the show, is that once somebody gets their hooks into you, I mean, they can pretty much drain an account. They can pretty much drain all the funding that you've saved and worked hard all your life, and then you're left, as you were talking about the Mickey Rooney thing. But let's go one step further, and we want to talk about some of the specific schemes that are out there that you see every day, that you know about every day, and how we can take, protect our loved ones, our neighbors, from these schemes. And one of the things that I think is really prevalent is a collection fraud, and that's when victims receive an urgent phone call. They say they're with a company or a part of the government, maybe they're with the IRS, and they need payment like immediately. How often do you see that, Detective?
We see it quite often. We see it a lot with power bills, water bills, somebody calling and saying, I'm Frank with FPL and your power is going to be shut off because you didn't pay the bill. And they understand that our senior citizens need their electricity for some medical needs and the urgency of it. And they don't want their power turned off, so they frantically give a credit card number over the phone to the perpetrator in fear that their power will be turned off.
And once they have that credit card number,
they're shopping in minutes.
Yeah. Now, Lieutenant, one of the things that was brought out, I think Tom mentioned that, is that if you do get a call, and we're going to talk about some of these other schemes and scams as well, once they get a call, if they're ever suspicious about the Sheriff's Department can help you out. You have a non-emergency line that anybody can call to report something that's, of concern to them.
Absolutely. We when we go out and do our community functions, we go talk at a variety of different parks and whatnot. We tell them, call us. If you get a phone call, stop. Get their callback number, what they claim to be their callback number. Tell them you call them back. Hang up. Call us and tell us what's going on, and we'll tell you more than likely whether or not we think it's a scam or not. Because the other thing is, they may give you a callback number, but if you hang up that phone and you don't leave it hung up for like 30 seconds, they'll just stay on the line. And they'll reconnect, because they'll hang up real quick and then pick back up and then dial the numbers. He's still on the other line, and he'll play like, you called him back and then continue on with the scam. So we tell them, get the callback number, hang up, call us, and also, if they're like a power company, go look up the actual number for the power company and call that number, not the number that they gave you.
And we've got the number up on the screen now, the non-emergency number at the Sheriff's Office, if anybody has any concern. And you would encourage people, to call that with any questions, correct? I mean, if they've gotten something in the mail or they get an email or something, if they have any concerns, and the Sheriff's Department is right there, you look through it, you examine it, and maybe, Detective Kazmarek gets the call the next day to investigate that.
Yeah, we actually get a variety. We've seen it through the mail. Recently did a Publishers Clearinghouse scam where they copied the letterhead and then put in there that, you got to pay the taxes before you get the prize. We actually share the information. So yes, they need to, as soon as they get something, an email, a text that's suspicious, call us up, let us know, give us the information, and then we'll share it. And we'll also share it with the other parts of the public so they know what's going on, because education is the key here.
And I think, the Sheriff's Department in the past, when a scam is kind of hit, once you've, investigated that, and so you get that information out there so other people will know, so they're not all targets.
Right. Like I said, education is the key here. Letting other people, especially our senior population, know what the scam is. When it comes across their plate, they can immediately recognize it and stop it before it continues on.
And I think that's so invaluable. Now, Detective, you were briefly mentioned this grandparent scheme. Tell us a little bit about how that is manipulated and how that preys upon people's, as John said, fear. What is the grandparent scam?
So the grandparent scam is where they get a phone call and the pick up and they'll say hello, and a lot of times the perpetrator on the other side will say grandpa, grandma, and a lot of times, again, our grandparents, they like to know who their grandchildren are and say, Bob, and immediately he runs with it. Yeah, it's Bobby. I'm sorry, I don't sound the same. I got in a car accident and broke my nose. So quickly, They're coming up with something to mask why they may not sound so familiar. They'll say they're out of the country in Costa Rica and they need money because they got in an accident and they got arrested. And frantically, our grandparents want to help their grandchildren. Will go and get prepaid Walmart cards, Visa cards, iTunes cards to try to help out their grandchild. Ultimately finding out that they've been victimized out of couple $1,000s at times, if not more, because they'll keep calling and saying they need attorney fees or something to that attribute.
And you get, John.
And if they actually ask them to wire money for the bail, as they sometimes even still do, they're not paying attention to the fact that maybe little Bobby he claims he's sitting in a Canadian jail, but the instructions are to wire the money to Jamaica.
Or wherever.
They don't pick that up, that they're sending it to a third party someplace else.
And I think a lot of that is preying upon people's fear and that they want to do the right thing. And it's talking about, the trust that senior citizens have. If they get a phone call, they automatically they have that kind of trust and want to do the right thing. And sometimes they overlook those alarming signs that maybe, if you were, 20 years younger, they pop right up into your face. But there's so many scams that are perpetrated. And one of the things that that I'd like for you guys to take a moment on is the fake lottery sweepstake. I mean, that's something where they call you, you've won, millions of dollars, but we need you to send us some money first.
Absolutely.
And I think again, as John said, there's two major criteria. It's fear and greed. So, do you see that a lot?
See it way too much, And with social media becoming so popular, Facebook is jumping on the publishing clearinghouse and lottery scam. So our senior citizens are starting to become a little tech savvy nowadays, and they're wanting to keep up with their family members, seeing what their children and grandchildren are on Facebook. Unfortunately, what happens is a phantom user will take over a Facebook profile that's not been in use in a while, will friend request or befriend the person on the other end, and then say, here, you've won this money, or I applied for this on an inbox message, and then they get into the whole illusion that they have won hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars through just Facebook alone. So they should always call and ask questions. Always call, the person, family members, making sure they're okay. Never trust what somebody's saying for face value.
Another great example of somebody sees that or hears that, pick up the phone and call the non-emergency number at the sheriff's office and say, I just saw this. And also, John, you pointed out that there's an elder abuse hotline as well that seniors can take advantage of. And is that available for questions such as these that would come up?
Absolutely. They'll even send someone to the door of either the victim or we had a situation where a local bank officer called the elder abuse hotline and a representative went to the perpetrator's home.
No kidding.
And he was committing affinity fraud, where he boasted about how faithful and godly of a Christian he was, for example. And he used that to gain this elderly couple's trust. And he was always wearing shirts and hats, broadcasting that. So the representative knocked on his door, and they never heard from him again. So they're very effective.
Good for the representative to
Absolutely.
do that. And between the elder abuse hotline, and I think we're going to have that up on the screen, so people can jot that number down, and the sheriff's non-emergency number to report any questions. There are resources out there to help the elderly if they suspect something, but not just the elderly, caregivers as well. If you're a caregiver and your mom or your dad or your aunt and uncle are receiving these kind of things, you can utilize those to report them as well, I would think. Would that be correct?
Yes,
absolutely. And I think, if you see, someone being abused, you want to report that. So, but I want to get back to some more of these schemes and frauds that they're doing. And one of the things that you mentioned, John, was an inheritance fraud too. And
Yes,
do you see that a lot?
Yes, sir. It's very closely related to the lottery scam. It's just a different vehicle. Instead of the lottery, you receive an unsolicited email, a letter, or a phone call from some agency purportedly being part of a law firm that's handling the estate of a long-lost, unknown relative of your family. For example, you share the same surname, Charles, as our client, our deceased client, Thursted Charles Clapsaddle III. And you could be the last surviving heir of his estate.
And if I'd only send them the money for
cover the
inheritance,
taxes.
taxes and everything,
Correct.
I would hear it. And a lot of people, when they get that, it's personal, and as you guys mentioned, they develop a relationship with their victim, it's like, they, hi, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, how are you feeling, that type of thing.
Positive reinforcement.
So there's a trust that, they establish almost at the very beginning of all of these scams.
And as we talked before, Charles, the cognitive impairments, if you peel back the layers of the onion, gentlemen, you'll probably agree, the taxes or the legal fees that are required by the victim to send in to receive their prize or their huge inheritance is way too small for the size of the winnings. For example, send in $2,000 to cover taxes on winnings of over, say, a couple $100 million. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, but people see that and they want to do. And again, there's the very, as you mentioned at the very beginning, there's a very trusting nature to people as well. And as you said, there's two major characteristics: it's fear and or greed. So if you think you're getting something for nothing, pick up that phone, call the sheriff's office, call the elder abuse hotline, and talk to somebody and find out. Well, it is too good to be true.
Call your financial advisor.
Yeah.
A good firm is going to have the resources
Right, exactly.
to look that up for you, and they'll be able to check with Federal Trade Commission and get back with you and say, well, no, that's not really a real deal.
Well, one of the scams that's I want to talk a few minutes about is, and again, it has to deal with the isolation and the loneliness of people, is this long distance romance scam where somebody, they're tech savvy now, they're on Facebook, they might sign up, and people are corresponding with them saying, we're your best friend, we're your girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever the case may be, but we need you to send us some money. How often do you see that, Detective?
We do see that a fair amount of times. Not only with sending the money, but a lot of times they will get the person to set up a bank account for them.
Huh.
And what they do is they fall in love with the person online, never meeting in face to face, and they will say, hey, listen, I want to come and move and live with you, but I need you to set up a bank account for me. And then send me the money that I'm going to put in that bank account so I can come and be with you. Well, the money that's going in that bank account is from other scams. And that's how when we subpoena bank records, a lot of times we'll end up at somebody's house and they'll say, well, that's, he was coming to live with me. I didn't know he was involved in anything bad. I don't know who he was. So that happens a lot of times. And also sending the money out.
And I would say, Lieutenant, again, this is another critical thing where outreach, community education is so important. If you see something and you sense something, you really need to educate yourself on there are people out there who are going to take advantage of you.
Absolutely, and it keeps evolving. They keep changing the scam. They keep tweaking it. Like, we talked about the Nigerian lottery scam. Well, if you don't live in Nigeria and you don't play the lottery, you can't win it. But now, instead of using the email, everyone's caught on the email. Now they've gone to text messages. They'll get the phone numbers and then they'll text you and try to get you into that way. So we have to keep educating and keep people up to speed, because they keep evolving and changing and keep tweaking it just a little bit, just to keep people going and giving their money up.
And I think too is the seniors, everybody's living longer now. People are living in their 80s, 90s, and when they get this kind of information, it's new to them. They don't know how to deal with it. So that's why I think education and outreach is so important. But one of the key things, that, and I liked all of your input in this, what are those red flags? You're a senior sitting at home. What are those red flags that you should be aware of when you get that call, you get that email, you get that letter, saying, we need you to send us money? What are those things that people should be aware of, John?
Look out for urgent threats from companies that you don't recognize. For example, I write my utility check to Florida Power and Light every month. If I get a threatening letter from Niagara Mohawk, for example, threatening to shut off my power, something's not right.
Right.
Sense of urgency. You need to act now.
Yeah.
Don't think, act now. Winning a contest that I didn't enter, I think, LT, you said, you got to play to win.
Exactly.
And another key thing I think too is when organizations or these scammers ask for personal information, your social security number, your bank account numbers. No company in their right mind ever asks for that type of information. So if you're getting something and we need your social security and your account number and stuff like that, that should be a definite red flag for everyone concerned, whether you're a senior or not. So. Do you see that a lot?
Yeah, I do. We do see that a lot. Another good red flag, though, is, and I want everybody to realize this, is the sheriff's office or any law enforcement entity is never going to ask for money to keep from coming to your house and putting you in jail.
Huh.
There's a lot of those on the emails. There's a lot of those on the emails where they will copy and paste a local law enforcement agency's headline or who the chief of police or a captain and put it into the email to make it feel real and say, if you don't send us X amount of dollars, we're going to send a warrants officer to your house and place you under arrest. That will never happen. That is not how any law enforcement agency operates. So that is an immediate red flag, and not to respond to that at all.
And I think that's a really good point to mention. So if you're a senior, you're isolated, you're living by yourself, you get something official looking with logos and a signature on it, and it says that, that again goes to John's point, it's fear. And they'll go to a bank and send the money, rather than pick up the phone, call the sheriff's department or call the elder abuse hotline. That's very good information, Detective, and thank you for sharing that. But one of the other things that I want you and all of us, especially you, Lieutenant, that you see all the time. What is that information that you want loved ones to know? Even though some seniors are here and they're living by themselves, but they have loved ones in and around this area. What should loved ones know? Family members, neighbors, whatever, about things that are happening, that are developing from these scanners.
Stay in contact with their parents. Be aware of what's going on in their lives. If they see personality changes, sudden withdrawal, they seem preoccupied. It's hard because it's their lives, but be involved, find out what's going on, especially with like the online dating scam. If they seem to find a new romance, kind of be inquisitive about it and question it. And then they may want to talk to their parents about having some sort of like power of an attorney over their accounts to help them out. So if something does happen, they can put the lock on it quickly before that money's drained off.
And that's the other thing we mentioned is once somebody gets their hooks in you, it's very hard to get them out. And next thing you know, your account that you've worked hard all your life is gone.
Absolutely.
So, but one of the things too is that, and I think you've mentioned this, is that these scammers. Well, or crooks, whatever you want to call them, they're crooks. They develop a close relationship with the people that they're trying to scam. They develop that sense of trust and understanding. Oh, I know what you're going through, that type of thing. So, I would think if you're a loved one, a family member, and you see that they have a new friend, that they're talking to, and that would be something of a red flag, wouldn't it, John?
Absolutely. I want to say, well, tell me more about this new friend. When can we meet this new friend? Oh, he's out of the country. Oh, that's a danger sign right there. A change in spending habits. Again, our seniors, there are some seniors still living today that lived through the Great Depression. Their children hear stories from their parents about the Great Depression. So all your life, mom and pop could pinch a penny twice. Now all of a sudden, they're the last of the big time spenders. That's a red flag.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good point. Changes in behavior, increased spending habits, perhaps. And that's why it's very important to have resources out there that can help the elderly, such as the Elder Abuse Hotline and the Sheriff's Office. If you have any questions, if there's any concerns from a loved one or a neighbor about the changes in an individual's behavior, I think that sends red flags. That you're there and you want to help.
And another thing we tell them too is being involved in their lives. If they share those emails with their family members, look at the grammatical structure of it. A lot of times we're seeing scams come out of Eastern Europe, the Middle East area. The grammar is, they try, but it's atrocious. There's a lot of grammatical errors, and there's misspellings. So, and when they try to play themselves off as an official organization, you can catch that. It's one of the things that they need to look at. And then if they're hearing the phone conversation, listen to the accent. You know, they may try to play off that they're stateside, and when they're really not, because they use random number generators now. Right. So they can spoof it like they're a local number. So those are kind of little things you can look for.
Well, that's an interesting point. I didn't think if something's coming from another, country outside of it, that ease with English and your syntax and grammar are different. So, if they get something, they need to look at it a little more closely and see those things. Now, gentlemen, unfortunately, we're kind of running down on time, but I want to spend a few minutes, if we can, about what seniors can do, seniors and their loved ones can do to protect themselves. And I think that's really critical. And we're going to start with you, Detective, if we may. Somebody gets a call, and they said, you've got this, and where do you step in? Where do you step in to help? Do you get a complaint, or what's the steps that the Sheriff's Department takes?
Well, ideally, yes, we get the complaint, and I get the case, and reach out to the victim and go over everything. Unfortunately, by the time that it's reported and we get it, the money that you've already sent, it's gone. It's gone, and getting it back is impossible. Sometimes we have some success with it, but it's gone within minutes. So to protect themselves is always ask questions. Always call the sheriff's office. If it sounds funny, your gut's going to tell you it's funny, and it's probably not real. We have a telephone reporting unit. We have great deputies there. They will get you in contact with anybody you have a question with and ask us the questions. And the information is on our Facebook page. A lot of times we put stuff out there about the sheriff's office with scams and things going on.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to understand, the fact that there's going to be occasions where people are going to get phone calls from numbers that they don't recognize, and as soon as you pick up that phone, the scam starts. And you need to be aware of that this is going to happen in the time that we live in now. This is going to happen, and it's going to happen with increasing frequency. But one of the things, John, that I'd like you to take a moment on, you've got to understand that there's people out there, and they're playing upon those two major factors that you mentioned, the fear your grandchild is lost or abandoned or in jail or whatever it is, and the greed that you've won thousands, millions of dollars, and they're dangling the little hook in front of you.
Just remember, we've heard these all our lives. There's no free lunch. If it sounds too good to be true, it is. And an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So if something sounds weird, something sounds off, talk to your bank representative, talk to your financial advisor, reach out to your family, reach out to community. We need to spend less time in front of the computer screen and more time out in the community connecting with people. Go to your community center, go to the Senior Friendship Center, go to your house of worship, reconnect with people, do real things with real people.
And I think, too, having that conversation with people outside of your, isolation, it would be very helpful, whether it's your church or leaving the library. And I'm sure the Sheriff's Department has, and crime prevention has a lot of programs and services that you're constantly out there at places passing along that information.
Yeah, we go, I have 3 deputies assigned to us. We go to morning community events, 2 or 3 a morning a piece.
Wow.
And then that's all we do is we share the information, talk about the latest trends with it. And every time we go, someone comes up to us and they tell us, I got this phone call, I got this email. And we share that with the rest of them in the room so they're educated and they're aware of it. And that's the core function there, is the education, making people aware of it and connecting.
Well, I also think, too, one of the key things, for seniors, because of their trusting nature, is that they need to be very cognizant of protecting their personal information, whether it's their social security number, whether it's their bank account. All of that information needs to be close held, because once that's out, then there are people out there who are going to take advantage. And I think you gentlemen see that all the time. So We're going to go around the table, get some final comments. Lieutenant, crime prevention is an integral part of the sheriff's office, and you're constantly outreaching, providing tips and resources and services that are available. But as it comes down to these scams, especially upon the most vulnerable, one of the most vulnerable parts of our community, the elderly, what are those key things that you want those citizens to know?
Question everything. Don't take it at face value. And then with the identity theft, a lot of our elderly population doesn't need credit, so put a freeze on their credit. So if it does fall in the wrong hands, they can't open those accounts and start generating the debt onto them.
That's a really good tip. Detective, you've seen this, and I'm sure, when you go and investigate these things and go to some people's homes, you see a lot of heartbroken people. Their savings are gone. Some people live very frugally, and when their $1,000 or $2,000 or $5,000 is gone, it's a sudden impact to them, and it really affects their quality of life.
It absolutely does affect their quality of life, mentally and physically, because they do need medications that they no longer can quite buy as easy as they did because the money's gone. Getting with the family, get with your family member, your power of attorney, make sure everything is in line and that you're taken care of. And, let's focus on, some of the world out there to look after their family members as well. Check up on your parents or your grandparents and make sure everything's on the up and up, because that's how we're going to be able to keep people safe from some of these scams.
Because, I would suggest to you, these scams aren't going to go away. And, as the lieutenant mentioned, they get a little more sophisticated. They tweak them here and there. They get a little bit more sophisticated. They try different routes and everything. So the scams aren't going to go away, but we need to have that education and outreach and kind of cooperation from a wider community to see how best we can prevent them. And I think that's a key issue. So John, first of all, I want to thank you for bringing this show to METV. I think it's been very valuable, and I would suggest even a follow-up program might be in order to talk about some of the other issues that are facing seniors as well. But we're going to welcome you to the METV series of things, talking about good choices for seniors and those things. There's a lot of issues out there that are facing seniors. Manatee and Sarasota County are very fortunate. We have a wide variety of seniors in our community. And we want to make sure that we provide that kind of quality information to them so they can make good choices.
Absolutely, Charles, and we're looking forward to providing that. And today we just want to remind you, slow down, calm down. Don't let yourself be rushed. Question everything. Investigate before investing. Check with your banker, your financial advisor. And we just hope today that this ounce of prevention that we've provided for our viewers will go a long way in helping our viewers outsmart the scammers.
Well, John, again, thank you, and thank you, gentlemen, for
Pleasure.
joining us. And thanks for your vigilance and looking after what I would consider one of the most vulnerable parts of our population, and that's our seniors. As I said earlier, they've worked hard all their life. They deserve to have that kind of area where they're not being problemed. They don't have problems to have to solve. But thanks to your vigilance, if there's somebody out there, that you can catch and put in jail, more power to you. And again, thank you for doing this. I'm going to point out, anybody has questions about anything that they're getting in the mail or online, they can call that non-emergency number, right, Detective?
They can call the non-emergency number anytime, yes.
And you'll get back to them, and somebody will get back to them.
There's always
and help
somebody
walk them.
there. Always somebody. We're 24 hours a day at the sheriff's office, so there's always somebody there to talk to.
I want to thank you, Detective Kazmarek, Lieutenant Andrews, and John. Thank you very much. We're going to welcome you back for your next edition. And this time, the next edition, you're going to be hosting this, and you'll have a whole slew of other guests as well.
Very good.
All right, John, thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen. And thank you for joining us on the special edition of Up Close on METV. Again, I would stress, if you need information or if you're curious about anything that you've received, call that non-emergency number for the sheriff or go to the Elder Abuse Hotline and find out more information. It's good for you, it's good for your family, and it's good for your loved ones. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Up Close on METV.